Warning: the following story contains descriptions of graphic violence. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome back to Sleeper Cell 41. I would like to inform my listeners that this particular episode contains sensitive and disturbing content that may be triggering for some viewers, and there will be limited visuals. Viewer and listener's discretion is strongly advised. If you or someone you know is struggling with trauma, please reach out for help. With that being said, let's continue. This is the case of Junko Furuta. Furuta was born on the 18th of January, 1971, and grew up in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, where she lived with her parents, older brother and younger brother. At the time of her murder, she was a 17-year-old high school senior and worked a part-time job at a plastic molding factory from October 1988 to save up money for a planned graduation trip. Furuta also accepted a job at an electronics retailer where she planned on working after her graduation. Furuta was well liked by her classmates and teachers and had high grades and infrequent absences. According to her friends, she dreamed of becoming an idol singer. The perpetrators of the crime were four male teenagers: Hiroshi Miyano, 18 years old; Joe Ogura, age 17; Shinji Minato, age 16; and Yasushi Watanabe, age 17, who in court documents were referred to as A, B, C, and D, respectively. Two others, Tetsuo Nakamura and Kiyoshi Ihara, were referred to as G and L. The four members of the group all had dropped out of high school in summer of 1988 and became involved in organized crime. They began using Minato's family home in Hidachi, Tokyo as a hangout. Beginning in October, they engaged in various crimes including theft, purse snatching and car theft, assault, and SA. On the 8th of November, the group abducted a 19-year-old woman in Hidachi and gang raped her in a hotel there. On the 27th of December, during Furuta's confinement, the group abducted another 19-year-old woman in Hidachi and gang raped her in a motel. On the evening of November 25th, 1988, Miyano and Minato rode around Misato on their motorcycles with the intention of robbing and raping local women, and they spotted Furuta, who was on her way home from her part-time job. Acting on Miyano's orders, Minato kicked Furuta off her bike and fled the scene. Miyano, under the pretense of witnessing the attack by coincidence, approached Furuta and offered to walk her home. Upon gaining her trust, Miyano took Furuta to a nearby warehouse and threatened her, claiming to be a member of the Yakuza and saying that he would spare her life only if she had followed his orders. That night, Miyano took Furuta by taxi to a hotel in Hidachi, where he raped her. He later called Minato's house and bragged to Ogura about the rape, after which Ogura told him not to let Furuta leave. In the early morning hours of 26th of November, Miyano took Furuta to a park near the hotel, where Ogura, Minato, and Watanabe were waiting. They told her they knew where she lived, and that the Yakuza would kill her family if she attempted to escape. Minato agreed to follow Furuta to be confined in a room on the second floor of his house in Hidachi for the purpose of gang raping her. Furuta was held captive for the next 39 days. On November 27th, Furuta's parents contacted the police about her disappearance. To discourage her further investigation, the kidnappers forced Furuta to call her mother 3 times to convince her that she had run away but was safe and staying with friends. When Minato's parents were present at the house where she was being confined, Furuta was forced to act as his girlfriend. The group dropped this pretense when it became clear that Minato's parents would not report them to the police, and they later claimed that they did not intervene because they were afraid of their own son, who had been increasingly violent toward them. On the night of November 28th, Miyano and the others, along with Nakamura and Ihara, gang raped Furuta, after which Miyano shaved her pubic hair with a razor and used a match to burn her genital area. In early December, angered by an escape attempt, the group repeatedly punched Furuta in the face, and Miyano burned her ankles with a lighter. They forced Furuta to dance to music while naked, masturbate in front of them, and stand on the balcony in the middle of the night with little clothing, and insert objects into her vagina and anus, including a metal rod and a bottle. They also forced her to drink large amounts of alcohol, milk, and water, smoke 2 cigarettes at once, and inhale paint thinner fumes. In one attack in the middle of the month, Furuta was beaten by the group, in the pretext that Mayano had stepped on a puddle of her spilled urine, after which he burned her thighs and hands several times with a lighter fluid. From around this time, Furuta, unable to bear the repeated assaults, would sometimes plead to be killed by her captors. By the end of December, Furuta was severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food, and eventually only milk. Due to her injuries and burns, she had become unable to go to the downstairs toilet, and was thereafter confined to the floor of the room in the state of extreme physical and mental weakness. Her appearance had been drastically altered after repeated beatings, with her face becoming so swollen that it was difficult to make out her features, and her infected wounds had started to emit a foul odor. On January 4th, 1989, after losing money in a game of mahjong the night before, Mayano decided to take his anger out on Furuta. He ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face, placed 2 shortened candles on her eyelids, and forced her to drink her own urine. Furuta was lifted and kicked, fell onto a stereo unit, and began a fit of convulsions. To prevent them from being stained with blood, the group covered their hands in plastic bags before beating her with their fists and an iron exercise ball, and dropped the ball in her abdomen several times. Mayano poured lighter fluid on Furuta and set her on fire. She made weak attempts to put herself out, but eventually stopped moving. The assault lasted for about 2 hours, after which Furuta died at 10 a.m. Less than 24 hours after her death, Minato's brother called to tell him that Furuta appeared to be dead. Afraid that their crime would be discovered, the group wrapped Furuta's body in a blanket and placed it in a large travel bag, then put the bag in a metal drum and filled it with wet concrete. At around 8 p.m. on January 5th, the group drove to a vacant lot near a construction site on the island of Wasaku in Koto, Tokyo, and dumped the drum there. In early 1989, Mayano and Ongura were arrested for their kidnapping and gang rape of a 19-year-old woman in December 1988. When police interrogated Mayano, he falsely believed that Ongura had already confessed to Furuta's murder and that the police were aware of his culpability, so he told them where to find her body. The police were initially puzzled by this confession, as they were questioning him about the murder of a different woman and her 7-year-old son, which had occurred 9 days prior to Furuta's abduction, a case which remains unsolved. The drum containing Furuta's body was discovered on the 29th of March, and she was identified via fingerprints. Minato Watanabe and Minato's brother, Nakamura, and Ihara were also arrested. The identities of the defendants were sealed by the court, as they were all juveniles under the age of 20. Journalists from the Shukan Bunshun tabloid uncovered their identities and published them, arguing that the accused did not deserve to have their right to anonymity upheld, given the severity of the crime. In July 1990, all were found guilty and sentenced by the Tokyo District Court for abduction for the purpose of sexual assault, confinement, rape, assault, murder, and abandonment of a corpse. All 4 appealed in July 1991. 3 were resentenced to longer terms by the Tokyo High Court. Hiroshi Mayano was originally sentenced to 17 years in prison and resentenced to 20 years, the longest sentence typically given in Japan, short of life imprisonment, which had been sought by the prosecution. Mayano's parents sold their family home and paid Furuta's parents 50 million yen in compensation, which their son's defense presented as a mitigating circumstance. A court-ordered psychological evaluation at the trial established that Mayano had a learning disability that did not impair his brain function, but delayed his emotional development. After his release in 2009, he changed his last name to Yokoyama. He reportedly boasted about his Yakuza connections and involvement in pyramid schemes. 2013, Mayano was arrested on suspicion of bank fraud and placing scam telephone calls, but remained silent and was not charged. Joe Ogura was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison. He was released in 1999 and changed his last name to Kimasaku. He worked in IT jobs after his release, but returned to organized crime after his past became known to those around him. In 2004, Ogura was arrested for assaulting Takatoshi Isono, an acquaintance whom he thought his girlfriend was involved with. Ogura shoved Isono into the trunk of his car and drove him to his mother's bar in Misato, where he assaulted him for 4 hours. Ogura was sentenced to 4 years in prison for the crime and was released in 2009. Shinji Minato, originally sentenced to 5 to 6 years in prison and resentenced to 5 to 9 years. His parents and brother were not charged. After his release in 1998, Minato moved in with his mother. In 2018, Minato, then unemployed, was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after striking a 32-year-old man in the shoulder with a metal baton and slashing his neck with a knife on a street in Kawaguchi, Saitama, during a dispute over a vehicle parking spot. In 2019, Minato was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison, suspended with probation for 3 years. Yasushi Watanabe was originally sentenced to 3 to 4 years in prison and resentenced to 5 to 7 years. He further appealed the verdict in the Supreme Court of Japan, but his appeal was denied in July 1992. He was released in 1996 and left his hometown to live with his mother. From the time the case was first reported in the media, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, the investigating body, received many calls and letters from the general public demanding that the perpetrators be severely punished, including by life imprisonment or with the death penalty. The Tokyo Public Prosecutor's Office, which had sought life imprisonment for Mayano during the trial, was criticized for not seeking life sentences for the other perpetrators, nor seeking the death penalty. The Tokyo District Court also received numerous calls and letters which criticized the perceived lightness of the sentencing, though a majority of legal professionals surveyed by Asahi Shimbun newspaper that the sentences were appropriate based on precedent. In the trial for the 1988 Nagoya couple murder case, the Nagoya District Court sentenced the main defendant, a 19-year-old boy, to death in June 1989, and the second defendant, a 17-year-old boy, to life imprisonment. This case drew comparisons to the Furuta case. Hiroshi Akatora, a professor of law at Nihon University, commented that the difference in sentencing was explained by the difference in the number of victims, 2 in the Nagoya case versus 1 in the Furuta case. Under the Nagayama standard, the legal standard used in Japan for the death penalty, 1 murder victim means life imprisonment or less is given, while 2 victims is considered a borderline case. Ikatura also stated that the prosecution in the Nagoya case had demonstrated clear intent and premeditation, while in the Furuta case, the intent to murder was more unclear. Furuta's funeral was held on April 2nd in 1989. During the ceremony, one of her friends delivered a eulogy written by her high school classmates. Furuta's intended future employer presented her parents with the uniform she would have worn in her position, and it was placed in her casket. At her graduation, the principal presented her parents with her diploma. The location on Wasako, where her body was discovered, is now an industrial zone. For more content, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thank you.